every day. It is like turned on for like years and years. So that's where they might not execute the auto start. They might not utilize the auto start techniques. Okay. So this is actually the way, these are the like 19 different kind of ways by which they can kind of achieve persistence on the host. Okay. Now let's go to the next one, which is the privilege escalation. So privilege escalation means that, okay, let's say for this one, I was able to come into this system and I was able to kind of, let's say, execute as a root as a Remnext user. But as you know that, okay, I was not able to execute certain code because I need root privilege. So as an attacker, what I will do is that I will try to find out certain ways by which I can become a root user. I can become a root user from the Remnext user. So this is called privilege escalation. You escalate your privilege. You add more privilege to your thing. So same for the Windows. So like, let's say there is a normal Windows user, public user, and from public user, can I become a admin user? Okay. So that's all thing like kind of, which is called as the privilege escalation. And then for the privilege escalation, there are 13 different techniques. So using any of this technique, kind of like the guys can actually, the attacker can actually become, let's say they can increase their privilege. So do you guys have any questions on that part? So for an example, let's say this one, uh, schedule task job. Okay. Uh, there was another technique that I want to kind of just share with you guys was, okay. So let's say there's schedule task, okay, which was executing a software with system privilege. And let's say as an attacker, what I do is that I just change the entry over there. So let's say the schedule task is executing a.exe with a.exe, which is a non-malicious process with system privilege. As an attacker, I will just go and make an edit over there, and I will say that rather than a.exe, execute malware.exe, my malware. So what will happen the next time that malware will run? It will auto run that with the system privilege. Okay. So there are a lot of ways by which you can kind of the attacker can kind of escalate the privilege. The other way which I showcased earlier was this one in the Wireshark, where you have seen that, okay, the PS exec.exe was getting ran by the attacker. So this is another way to kind of achieve system level privilege on the system. Okay. So thing is that I hope this is quite clear why we are kind of discussing this. So these are the ways by which attacker can actually kind of achieve their objective. Like they can kind of go to stage by stage. They can either get persistence, they can kind of get privilege escalation, and all these techniques by which they can kind of achieve those, it will be already mentioned in this one. So you will be kind of seeing all the techniques that the attacker can utilize to get to, let's say, achieve privilege escalation, for an example. In similar way, we can go through all of these things and kind of understand so what all this thing means. So I will just quickly go through like a summary. So privilege escalation means that, okay, adversary is trying to gain higher level preference permissions. Defense evasion is something like where the adversary is trying to avoid getting detected, and these are the ways by which they can kind of avoid getting detected. And I think this is the biggest way. Like it has a lot of techniques, like 42 techniques over here. Now there's another called credential access, which means the adversary is trying to steal account names and passwords. How they can do that? This is the way by which they can do that. Okay. Now the next thing is discovery. Discovery means that, okay, adversary is trying to understand your environment. So let's say they have actually let's say the example that I was saying earlier, where I'll just quickly close this out. Okay. So I was giving you guys one example where I was telling you that, okay, about one real incident where the attacker actually traversed from, let's say, the computer 1 to computer 2, 3, 4, 5 and all. Okay. So how they can do that? So how they do that is by discovery. Okay. So they try to discover who are the active hosts in that organization, and can they kind of logging into those hosts. So this is what discovery means. The adversary is trying to figure out your environment. Lateral movement is where the attacker is trying to move through your environment. So let's say the example that I gave where the computer one, the attacker was able to move to computer five, and computer five they were able to move to other computers like A, B, C, D, E. Okay. So this is what like lateral movement means. And these are different techniques by which kind of they can do that. Okay. Now the collection is something which what it means is that the attacker is trying to gather data of interest. So let's say they got data, like let's say they are trying to gather all the doc files which is like confidential existing on that host. So they are trying to gather all those files. Okay, this is what collection means, and they can do that using different kind of ways. Okay, over here. Now the next part is command and control. This actually means that the attacker is trying to gather the trying to communicate with the compromised system to control them. So here the attacker is trying to kind of set up a command and control server. They're trying to kind of, let's say, set up an IP address from where they will kind of expel the data out. So they are sending the data out to the adversary. So where they're trying to steal the data. And now the last part is the impact. Impact is the adversary is trying to, let's say, manipulate, interrupt, or destroy your system and data. Let's say they are trying to kind of do a encryption. Let's say so data destruction can be one of the way, or let's say they expel the confidential data of your organization and they made that publicly available to be downloaded. Okay, so that is also one of the impact of the organization. So impact is related to the organization part, like what all kind of impact we can get from the attacker activity. So I hope this matter attack framework is now kind of almost clear to you guys how you can use that, and it will be really useful for you guys to kind of um, spend some time after this session and understand more about this matter attack framework. Okay, so I hope this was interesting. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ping me now, tell me now. Okay, now let me just see if I have certain things to kind of say. So this is something I will be kind of discussing later. Okay, and this is actually we have already seen earlier, so I didn't spend the time again on that. And this is one of the report. Okay, this is one of the report that I like to share. Like if you see over here, this was a report actually, where what you can do is that as an exercise too, let's say you are reading a report about the malware attacker activity, how the malware attack works. So what you can do is that you can figure out what are the different sub techniques, TTPs, that the attacker has kind of tried to kind of execute. So let's say just by reading this sentence, which says that a scheduled task command was created, we can say that it is closely related to T1053. T1053. How? If you go to the matter attack framework, if I go to the initial access execution, if I go to this one, and you see the techniques is T1053, right? Scheduled task. So to be exact, it will be T1053.005. And what you can do is that you can maybe just mention that, okay, this command looks like it is how it is related to matter attack framework. You can just say T1053.005. Okay. In similar way, command line interface is T01059. It's again falls into the initial execution part. Okay. In similar way, what I will tell to you guys is that whenever you write any kind of like documentation, always try to add this ID to this one, okay, to map out this data with the MITRE attack framework. So it will make the document a little bit much more concise, like what all techniques that the user, that the attacker used to kind of expel to the data to kind of like achieve their objective in the company. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. Now, do you guys have any question on this slide? Okay, if not, let me just see what all things I have to discuss. Okay, so this is something about the Yara rule. I will just quickly go to that. So guys, before I proceed for the